Any issue you come across with the AC, you always want to make sure you find the breaker and make sure the breaker's off, there's no other live components, and the thermostat for it itself is also turned off. So with no electricity going to this AC, we can have the cover off and get to work on replacing any parts we need to replace. Start by removing the styrofoam cover. Now we're going to go after all of our screws. Take this portion off. So with our wires right here, let's just feed over, under, and over again. Set them off to the side. And these tabs, you just press underneath both sides and it'll come right out. Following the same process like we did with the fan housing. So you press down, in, and lift up slowly. Straight up, rotating it to avoid the wires. Sometimes this stuff will be stuck to it. You want to make sure this stays with the wire. This is what seals your wires from the inside. So you want to make sure this goop stays in place. We'll take our plate off of our electrical box. Now, the fan motor wires will be located here, 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 and then one right behind this capacitor right there. Make color coding easier, we recommend you cut the wires while still connected to the board. This will help you keep track of all the colors that need to go back into place, including our main fan wire. By pinching on the back side, you can push this plug outwards to give you easier access of all your wiring. When disconnecting the ground wire, you want to make sure pull separate from the separate ground wire. You will use this later to connect to your new ground. Now we can begin to pull our wires through. But we'll start disconnecting that zip tie and pulling through all of our wires. The last wire we're going to disconnect is our neutral wire, and the best recommendation, considering how narrow that space is to snip the wire at the halfway point. So pull and then cut. This portion will be reused later. When dismounting our motor, the back bolts on this side will be 3/8 and the bottom bolts underneath the fan shaft will be 5/16. So we'll start with these bolts back here. Now when pulling the fan out, you want to make sure that your squirrel cages on both sides are not damaged. You can tell by looking down the side and observing how much take there is. So making sure that they're nice and straight. If the motor is to be replaced, these squirrel cages must be replaced if damaged as well. Taking the motor out, carefully setting it somewhere where you can work. So in order to take these squirrel cages off, you'll need an 1/8 inch Allen key, which can be slid in through a little slot that you'll find on your squirrel cage. If it is too hard to undo the squirrel cage, you can also come in through here and line it up for better leverage. After one turn is done, we can come back in through the top and finish loosening the screw. When pulling off the squirrel cage, it is important not to grab it from one side. You need to use both hands and use your thumbs and slowly pull it off, working it back and forth to get it off. Just like so. So we'll do the same thing for this side. It's too difficult, so we'll come down here. Do one turn. Same as before, both hands. Take it off. After the squirrel cages have been removed, we'll then need to take our mounting plate off of the old motor. This is done with an 11/32 wrench. Then we will also take off the insulating guard of our motor, and carefully peeling it off, as this will need to be reused. Notice this new motor does not have a plate on it. This is where our old plate comes into play. So the old motor was mounted on the bottom side because this housing is larger. With these new motors and the newer replacements that we're introducing to our overheads, they will need to be mounted in the higher hole. So we'll place it into the higher hole and tighten our nut only snug, not super tight. So to where there's still play. So you'll notice that there is a cut edge on these shafts, and that cut edge needs to be lined up with the top of that screw. So as that screw goes in, it is able to be lined up. So with that screw lined up with the flat edge, we can slide our motor on. Same as the base plate, we will only need to tighten this screw snug. We do not want to torque it all the way down, as it may need to be adjusted. Then you can put your insulation piece on to help you line it up. Same as before, line it up. Tapping on the front of it does help, so long as you're not only doing it on one side. Now we'll tighten this screw just snug, not fully torqued down, so that way these cages can be moved. Now we'll go ahead and prepare our wires by pulling all of them out to length. You'll notice 3 wires are going to be longer than 2 wires. So what we're going to do is cut these connections to the same length. So we'll match the rest of these and put new ends on them. When stripping the wires, we want to make sure that we only take off as much length as there is to put in the connector. And tightly squeeze. You'll notice the pliers you'll be using will say insulated and non-insulated. These are insulated connectors because they have plastic on them. You'll make sure it's tight and no exposed wiring is showing out the backside. Then you'll repeat the process for the other 2 wires. when we prepare our neutral wire, we're going to replace this ring terminal for a butt splice. And then following the same process with our other terminal connectors, we will strip the same amount off. So now we'll take our motor and gently place it underneath your compressor wires. Gently lowering it down. You'll notice I'm not able to slide it all the way in because my squirrel cage isn't lined up. You'll need to take it back out and adjust it. We will start by tightening up our bottom plate for mounting the motor. Okay, so now everything is mounted to keep the motor in place. So now what we'll do is, with all your wires out of the way, we'll spin the motor and test to see if our squirrel cages are lined up. What we're going to do is we're going to route all of our wires nice and loose, all into a bundle, and then we're going to zip tie right in the center from the motor to this housing. And cut our excess. And then we're going to take all of our fan motor wires, should be a total of 5, and feed them through this hole. Nice and loose, don't pull too tight, just make sure there's no movement. Then take our plug and grab all the wires going through that hole and apply this by rolling it under. Pushing it together and then sliding it back into that hole. We can follow our color code that we left in place here. Starting with the black, then the yellow, then the red, and now the ground, connecting these two together that we previously left loose. Make sure that's in there good. Move this out of the way. Now we'll take out our brown wire and put it in the same place. Having a pair of pliers and pushing at the same time while squeezing down on it will help you get it secure in place. And lastly, we'll connect our ground. Make sure it's tight in place. Now we can make sure all our wires are pushed out of the way and put our housing back on. We will also connect the neutral wire by stripping the wire this back in place. Housing back on. Move these wires out of the way, slide it in gently, and place. Squeezing all sides. We'll screw this in place. While also making sure your foam block is secure. We'll move on to the rear fan motor housing, and we'll start by lining it up with this groove right here. Lowering it in place. You'll hear snaps. And then we can apply the rest of the screws. We'll take our compressor wires and feed them over, under, very carefully. And then back over again. Now the fan motor has been completely replaced. The cover can be put back on and then further tested. Turn your breakers back on. Ensure you hear no rattling noises or unsettling noises while trying to test your AC.